This is the March 31st, 2021 Finance Committee meeting, and I am calling it to order, and Robert Pomprion is going to read Governor Baker's open meeting law dictum.
Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Baker issued an emergency order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be broadcast live on Channel 8 and on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by following the call-in information on the bottom of the live broadcast screen. For the Zoom meeting information relating to remote participation, please contact Cindy Knox, IT Director, at cnox@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 123, or Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting.
Thank you, Robert. So those present from the Finance Committee, I'm Pat Diamond.
And I'm Lou Conrad.
And we've lost Selby. He fell off the end of the earth.
I just readmitted
On his
him.
way back.
Ah. A little lucky he'll actually show up. Terry is trying to get in as well, so. Must be a lot more difficult than I thought.
There he is.
Aha, there's Selby. So Selby, if you would announce yourself, we can get on with this. Should we all blame Cindy?
He's there.
Yes, that's protocol.
Oh, he's connecting
Connecting.
audio.
There he is. Selby, are you on?
You're muted. If you are,
He is muted. Yeah.
this is going almost as, aha. That's going to be Terry, because that's Melinda.
He's okay. So Selby's there. His text says he's just having technical.
Yeah, probably the audio.
There we go.
And there's Terry.
Aha. Hey, Terry, you know, it says Melinda Weber right under your face.
I know, right?
Does she know that?
How about that now?
That's much better.
No, it's not better. But
Well,
it's
in the
more
context,
it's more accurate.
in the context of a quorum, it's much better.
Oh, Lord. It was crazy. I just went and picked up Melinda's car with her, and she was coming home, and I was going back to the office, and my reminders popped up on my phone. I go, oh, no. So I had to rush home to do this.
If you would announce yourself as a member of the FinCom, we can get on with the meeting because we have a quorum.
Terry Harville, FinCom member. And what else am I?
So we should get started, Robert. The meeting is ready. We have a quorum.
Apologies.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, good evening. The first item before you is a reserve fund transfer request, which I did send to the committee. We're requesting an RFT in the amount of $23,000 to be transferred to the general insurance account number 01193. The present balance in that budget is $1,362. And the amount being requested will be used to pay the outstanding amounts due on the workers' comp audit of approximately $11,500 and the deductible for the 111F insurance totaling $10,000. And the expense is extraordinary or unforeseen, which is the criteria for an RFT, as the amount owed for the workers' comp audit was determined after the FY21 budget was prepared, and the deductible of the 111F was not known at the time. However, they're limited to no claims at the time of the budget preparation. So what's happened in this line is, one, we had to do a workers' comp audit, which was done after the budget had been set. So this was an unforeseen impact. And then also the 111F insurance, and just for the committee's benefit, the 111F insurance covers police and firefighters in the event that they're injured in the line of duty. It's a specific insurance amount. So we're requesting $23,000 for the RFT. The select board did review and approve on March 16th. And I don't know if there are any questions from the committee through the chair.
Are there any comments or questions on this request?
Nope, I get it, understand. Terry,
Doesn't seem like it, Robert. So should we carry on with a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the transfer.
I'll second that.
Seconded. So Pat Diamond says aye.
Terry Harville, aye.
Lou Conrad, aye.
Robert, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And Pat will coordinate for your signature.
Yeah, we'll get we'll zap it with electronics.
All right. The second item through the chair is I wanted to just do a brief overview of the financial articles on the town meeting warrant. And as the Finance Committee knows, you'll be meeting next Tuesday, April 6th at 6 in a joint meeting with the Select Board to review and approve the budget for town meeting. And the Select Board will be approving the warrant. And as the FinCom does, you have the authority also to take positions if you choose on the financial articles. In other words, if you've seen previous warrant articles on the bottom, there's a spot for Finance Committee where the Finance Committee wants to recommend, doesn't recommend, wants to report at town meeting. So for the purposes of tonight, it's just to do a brief overview. The FinCom doesn't have to take any action tonight if you want to think that over. And then on the 6th with the Select Board is when you'd be taking your votes. Additionally, you will get the final, we're going to look at the working draft, which is just about done. You will get the final draft of the warrant will be in the Select Board packet. We'll transmit it to the FinCom and the Select Board on Friday. That's when the warrant closes. It'll also be available to the public on the town's website. You'll also have the final budget, which we'll talk about the budget in a minute, going into Tuesday. So obviously there could still be changes made by the Select Board or the FinCom on Tuesday. After it's approved on Tuesday, the warrant will then be posted. It's sent to print. It will be mailed to all 4,200 households in the town in advance of town meeting. It'll be posted on the town's website. I'll talk about in a minute. We have a series of other public outreach efforts. We'll also be doing a lot of public outreach as we usually do leading up to town meeting as we move forward. Just real quick, so in terms of announcements, so April 2nd, you'll get the final version of the budget and the warrant. That's this Friday. April 6th at 6 will be the joint meeting on Zoom with the Select Board. And Ms. Cabri and I will go through the budget in more detail and review the warrant and take any questions. Town meeting is Monday, April 26th at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. And two other upcoming events there's a TIF, a tax increment finance article, the Catania Spagna olive oil company is going to be asking town meeting for a TIF, and we can talk about that tonight, but there's going to be a public forum on Wednesday, April 14th at 6 p.m. that we're going to be promoting, encouraging folks to attend. The company will be making a presentation on the expansion that they have proposed at the plant, and then going over the terms of the TIF and so forth. They'll also be making a presentation at town meeting, but April 14th is designed, to get more outreach and questions. Also, as I sent to the FinCom, on April 28th, which is a Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., the Ayer Shirley Regional School District is going to be doing a presentation in Shirley on the field project. As the FinCom knows, Ayer has passed the field project and the borrowing. It's subject for an election in Shirley in May, and this is a outreach forum to educate the public on the project. It's been a while, and the Ayer FinCom and Ayer Select Board have been invited to attend if you can attend, as it's a project of mutual interest to both folks, and we'll send reminders out on that. So that's sort of just a coming attractions for everybody.
Thanks, Robert.
So through the chair, I'm going to use the shared screen for the working draft. I think Ms. Antonellis will work the screen. And in the interest of time, I'll go give a brief overview. And then more importantly, if you have questions through the chair or comments, that's the most important part of it. So actually, before, Mr. Chair, if you don't object, I'm going to talk about the special town meeting piece.
Not at all. Please do.
Carly, I'm sorry. Can you pull up the ambulance piece? So before we get to the annual town meeting, and we've had to do this in the past, right now, and Pat knows this from the buy board meeting, we have an ambulance enterprise fund that funds the ambulance operations in the town. And the ambulance, and I sent this to the FinCom earlier, the ambulance enterprise is currently running a shortfall. And that shortfall we've determined, and we being the fire chief, Ms. Cabri, and myself, the shortfall is not due to spending. It's not a management issue. It's a revenue issue. We have noticed that through the course of COVID, as it's gone on, and this is changing now, but there was a significant decrease in the amount of ambulance calls during the first 9 months of COVID. I think, as the fire chief said the other night, with the COVID pandemic, a lot of people were avoiding hospitals if they could and so forth. So there's a shortfall of about $7,185. You'll see on the screen on the bottom. This was done by Ms. Cabri. So we need to correct that shortfall before the end of the fiscal year. And in order to correct that, it takes an act of town meeting, and specifically authorization from town meeting to transfer funding into the ambulance enterprise. So what we're going to propose is a special town meeting that would happen right at 7 before the annual town meeting. It'd be one article, and it would ask town meeting to authorize the transfer of up to $20,000 to balance the ambulance enterprise fund. Now you'll see the shortfall is only about $7,185, and that's as of March. However, we still have April, May, and June to get through, and we want to have some level of a little bit of a cushion just to make sure that it's covered. It's important to note when you see the article, it's up to 20,000. If we don't need the 20,000, obviously it will revert back to ambulance retained earnings, and that's the source of the $20,000. So there's retained earnings, and on this chart you'll see it's about $50,000. We're looking to get town meeting approval to transfer that to balance the enterprise account. So we have had to do this on occasion in the past, not just for the ambulance enterprise, but other enterprise funds, and we have to have a special town meeting that occurs right before the annual town meeting. So you will see there'll be two warrants. The special town meeting warrant will be one article for the ambulance fund at 7, and then posted for 7:05. If town meeting takes longer on the first one, that's okay, for the annual town meeting. So I did send that accounting to the FinCom. We are going to touch upon it again with you and the select board on Tuesday night, but I wanted to make you aware of that and see if you had any questions. Lastly, we're confident, Chief Johnson is confident, Ms. Cabri is myself, that this is a one-time anomaly that has been driven by COVID-19. It's not a huge deficit, a huge shortfall, but it is a shortfall that we do have to correct by July 1st. And we're hopeful. Chief Johnston reported last night to the select board that we're seeing an uptick now again in ambulance transport, but for the first about 8 or 9 months of the pandemic, there was a real decrease. So I don't know if there's any questions.
That's an interesting situation. I never would have thought of that, but yeah.
Well, I would have, so Robert, so that is the expectation that it will not go much higher than that, than where it is now, or what's the kind of expectation on that?
The expectation based on the trend is in Ms. Cabri in her forecasting always takes into account the unforeseen and likes to have some level of buffer, so we wouldn't want to come up short and then have to have another town meeting, say in June. It's at about 8,000, 7,000 in change right now. Based on the trend, we don't anticipate it to be the full 20,000, probably somewhere between 12 and 15 based on the trend. And then we probably see as we move into FY22, we're hopeful this issue will correct itself as transport upticks.
So
I would think that if you look at the only thing that's going to cause a greater requirement for ambulance services is a catastrophe, which we've not had, or statistically, you're going to have a rate of growth that's going to be coincident with the growth in age and population. So, I would suspect it's going to go back to where it was once everybody is vaccinated. We have herd immunity, and we can all go out and walk around and herd. So yeah, it makes sense. I can see that it's not going to stay low, but it's going to have to grow slowly. Unless you have a disaster in mind that's going to use a lot of ambulance services. It'll grow, but.
Does this same phenomenon affect the police department at all?
I think definitely in the beginning, a lot of calls for service, and especially as we looked back at it, there was a decrease. I mean, the police and fire are both always busy, but in those first months of COVID, a lot of folks were really just staying put on the ambulance end, and that's what. It's not a huge shortfall because we generally don't have a shortfall, but it was enough that it did impact the enterprise fund for the ambulance.
Interesting. Okay.
So is the funding for this eventually going to come out of stabilization?
This is going to come out of so we have a set of retained earnings within the enterprise fund. So within the enterprise fund, we set aside retained earnings for these purposes. So it'll come from there. So it won't hit stabilization, and it won't hit the general fund, if you will.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you letting us know that. Is there anything you want us to do about it?
There's no
give you a tacit approval, or just say no, thank you. Anything you want?
I think on Tuesday, what I would suggest on Tuesday, the FinCom takes its votes on Tuesday on positions. So for example, if the FinCom wants to recommend this article and you'll have it or support it, you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So then now we'll go to the shared screen, which has the working draft of the warrant, which you'll get the final one on. And I know Carly will get that up in just a moment. And you have all of these materials electronically.
Earlier.
So we'll just go right to the articles. and then if there are any questions through the chair. A lot of these are sort of standard, if you will, if you've been to town meeting before, and I'll highlight some of the changes. So the first article are the salaries of elected officials, which are the stipends of some of the elected officials. They have to be set by town meeting. That's this article here. You'll see the FY21 salary, the FY22 salary, and it reflects a 2% increase. And you'll see in the explanatory note, back on February 18th, myself and the benefits payroll manager, per the financial policies, made a formal recommendation, as we do each year, recommending a 2% cost of living adjustment for all non-union and elected officials and reserve firefighters. So that's this first article before you. Article 2 and 3, you'll see they're placeholders right now because the negotiations are concluding, and it's not uncommon that the negotiations come right down to the line. But the first one would be the funding for the Air Police Patrol contract, which expires on June 30th and has been in negotiations. And number 3, Article 3, would be the Air Police Patrolmen's Communication Division, the dispatchers. So they're actually one union, but two divisions. We are cautiously optimistic that by Tuesday we will have agreements in place, and we'll talk about on Tuesday night both of these articles, which are for the first year funding of the contracts. They're 3-year agreements. I always do a brief presentation at town meeting showing the first year costs and the costs of the agreement, so everybody is on the same page. And I hope to maybe be in that position on Tuesday for that. I also want to point out, this is the last sort of variable remaining on the FY22 budget. So all of you have the draft 3 budget. You'll get the final version on Friday. This is the last piece is the funding for these 2 contracts. Article 4, which we'll talk about in great detail on Tuesday, is the omnibus budget. And for those of you that have been to town meeting before, this is just the article, and then inside the warrant, we print the whole omnibus where we put the notes on what the changes are. And we're going to review that with everybody on Tuesday. I want to point out that this year we do not have to use any free cash to balance the budget. In previous years, we've used some free cash to balance the budget. The budget also reflects, as the explanatory note says, there's a 2% cost of living adjustment for all non-union personnel in that. So again, in the interest of time, unless the committee wants to, because we're going to review the budget on Tuesday, we'll get into the details on Tuesday. But Article 4 is the omnibus budget. And once the article is read and moved at town meeting through the moderator, the buy board, we generally do a brief presentation on the omnibus budget, since it's the largest article, about a 10-minute presentation. And we will have a budget book, as we did last year, for all attendees that also talk about the major components of the FY22 budget. Article 5 is the regional school district assessment for the Ayer Shirley schools. And you have those numbers there, and the FinCom was at that joint meeting with the select board back in February. Article 6 is the regional assessment for the Neshoba Valley Technical School assessment. And both superintendents are present at the town meeting if there are any questions. Then Articles 7 through 10, and these, and you'll see it says handouts provided at town meeting. In the budget book, there's additional information. These are the enterprise fund articles for FY22. So Article 7 is the solid waste enterprise that funds the transfer station and solid waste operations. Article 8 is the ambulance fund for FY22. So the special meeting we talked about is to correct, obviously, this year. This is the ambulance enterprise funding for FY22. Article 9 is the sewer enterprise, and Article 10 is the water enterprise. And these are generally standard enterprise articles every year. The numbers do change. In the budget book, Ms. Gabri has some information on that. And of course, if there are questions from the town meeting, we will take those as well. Article 11 is a borrow article, and this is for the capital budget requests. And as Pat knows, as a member of the Capital Planning Committee, the Capital Planning Committee vets all capital requests each year from the departments. And per the town's financial policy, any capital request that's over $50,000, we generally borrow for. And the reason being is, one, the town has such a strong bond rating and the borrowing rates are so favorable. It's been, for the larger items, 50,000 and above, to borrow. And then items under 50,000, we purchase outright from capital stabilization. So you see here on this borrow article, at town meeting, we prepared the presentation to talk about each of the items. And these were all recommended from the capital planning committee. So that's the borrow article. And then the next one, Article 12, is a transfer article for a capital budget. These items, as you can see, are 40,000 or below. The article would transfer funds from capital stabilization that has a balance of about 2.7 million to pay for these outright. So we won't borrow on these. These are, if you will, these are smaller purchases straight out. And again, departments are available to make presentation. And if you want to look, if you go to the capital planning webpage on the town's website, you can see all of the materials that capital viewed on these requests. Okay. Article 13. So if the HVAC system at the police station is the original 1996 system, and it has exceeded its life. And we talked about this at Capital, and Chuck has put forth a proposal to Capital to replace the entire system, which is needed. The system costs estimate is going to be about $140,000. This article transfers 92,000 from previous borrow. So we had previous premiums when we borrowed without a reserve when we sold bonds previously. There's an amount that Ms. Gabri is recommending we use 92,000 from that, because it's just been sitting there. And then the balance, which you saw above in the article, is about 50,000 that we borrow. So combined, that would fund the HVAC system for the police station. Article 14 is from the Urban Development Grant, UDAG replenishment. We resolved a eminent domain. The town had taken land where the Depot Square, where the train is, for the Depot Square parking project. And the settlement of the eminent domain lawsuit were 3 payments of $230,000. This is the final payment to settle that matter, and it would come from free cash. Article 15, these are the post-employment benefits for the town. We have an OPEB committee that meets quarterly that oversees post-employment benefits. So all towns, as the committee knows, in Massachusetts are required by, I believe it's 2038 now, don't hold me to that, to meet the funding of all of our post-employment benefits for retirees and so forth. And we've been putting $300,000 a year in that. The local meals tax, in this case, the $122,000 is the local meals tax. And then we supplement it with free cash, in this case, $178,000, to get to the $300,000. So per the finance policies, we've been using the local meals tax probably the last 6 years, along with free cash, to get to the $300,000. Then these raise and appropriate articles, these articles, ask town meeting to raise this amount of money. These articles are what will hit the tax rate in November. And per the select board, we tried to keep these at a real minimum. Article 16 is the first year's interest on borrowing for $39,257. So those items that we're going to borrow for above in Article 11, these are the first year borrowing costs. Number 17 is the funding for aquatic weed control for the town ponds. This comes from the Conservation Commission for $30,000. They treat the vegetative weed situation in the various town ponds, Flanagan Pond, Sandy Pond, and so forth. They have this on a schedule. It's due, it's about $30,000 on that article. Article 18, the Conservation Fund was established about 2 years ago by town meeting and put about $500,000 in that fund for the purpose of purchasing open space and conservation land for the town. And every year we've been putting about $5,000 in there. So that's what this article would do. Number 19 is a matching grant, the firefighters grant. They apply for every year. There's a match, which is $5,000 is the local match to the grant. If they don't get the grant, this article, the 5,000 just reverts back. If they get the grant, this is the local match. And Chief Johnson generally talks about it at town meeting, what the grant is specifically for. It changes each year. Article 20, and the FinCom will recall a while back, Mr. Johnston and I came and talked to you about this. Town meeting recently created an account for compensated absences. So Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 13D, if town meeting adopts it, which town meeting did back in June, allows the town to create a dedicated account for compensated absences, specifically retirements. And as the committee knows, and we talked about this at length, historically, folks, when they would retire, we wouldn't always know exactly when, we would fund their unused vacation time benefits they were entitled to upon separation. We would either fund them from the departmental budget or from the reserve fund. The problem is it was not the most accurate best practice tool, because sometimes we'd hit the reserve fund more than we would like to fund this, or it would significantly impact the departmental budget. So this fund would allow us to plan better and fund better for when separations happen. This looks to put $50,000 from free cash in it. Ms. Gabri has calculated that we'd like to get this fund to about 100,000. So this would be the first deposit, and then we'd be looking next year to put another 50,000. And then moving forward, as Pat had brought up at the buy board, between the FinCom, my office, Select Board, Lisa, we would monitor it moving forward. And then Article 21 is the forward funding of the town's pension. And I know the FinCom, we talked about this as well. We learned from Middlesex County Retirement that you can forward fund your pension assessment, which we get each year. And working with them, we were able to calculate that if the town made 2 consecutive payments of $300,000 forward funding the pension assessment, we would experience savings of about $1.5 million over the next 10-year period. So town meeting made the first $300,000 deposit at the October town meeting, and this would be the second one. And then we would realize those savings with the future assessment through 2035.
Well, Robert, question if I may.
Yeah.
So that's a saving out of general fund expense?
I'm sorry?
What account would recognize the savings of $1.3 million? How would that be recognized?
It will be recognized through the town's pension line item. So it's in the general fund. So there's a general fund line item for the town's pension assessment.
That was my question. Would it be general funded? Yes.
So,
Great,
and we,
thanks.
yep. Then Article 22.
Robert?
Yes. Yep.
Hi, it's Lou. Regarding the pension assessment, the forward funding of the I thought you said that this article would be the second of the 2 years, and yet, if that's correct, in parentheses, it says this is the first.
Lou, excellent catch. That's why we do working drafts. I've got to make that change.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm making a note that it is the second. I've got to change that. It is the second. Good
You-
catch.
Get a silver star, Lou.
Yes. Thank you. That's why we do these reviews. That should be the second. Good catch.
That's great. Yeah.
And then the stabilization fund article. So this article seeks to do two things. We have two stabilization accounts. We have the general stabilization fund and we have the capital stabilization fund. Both of them, to access both of them requires a vote of town meeting. And it also requires a vote of town meeting to put deposits in, if you will. So think of this as we're making deposits. And we've had a lot of discussion on this at the buy board and so forth, because we're fortunate to be in the position that we're in. What this article as it stands would look to transfer $795,000 from free cash into the capital stabilization. I'm sorry, let me strike that. Total amount of free cash available for stabilization purposes, $795,607. This article would put $5,607 into stabilization and $790,000 into capital stabilization. And people ask, well, that's such a disparate amount. One is so big, one is so little. Why? And we're going to come off this for just a minute through the chair and go to just
Please
a
do.
different set of slides on the stabilization to just talk about that and how we came up with that recommendation. So, and we're discussing this, as I said, to the select board and the buy board late this year, because it's important to note that the certification of free cash this year was extremely late in the budget process at no fault to the town, but the Department of Revenue is backed up on all kinds of matters due to COVID. So we got free cash very late. So what this first slide shows you, the stabilization balance as of December 2020 is 2.6 million. And beneath it, the capital stabilization balance is 2.7 million. Now, not that long ago, the stabilization was much smaller than that, and we didn't even have a capital stabilization fund. So what happened is we funded the stabilization. We exceed the benchmark for the policies. That doesn't mean we don't keep saving on stabilization. But the last several years, we've looked to ramp up the capital stabilization, because the capital stabilization is going to be your major infrastructure emergency, water main breaks, issues at the plant. The capital is always the most expensive emergency or unforeseen. Stabilization can be used for other purposes. Also, in the event that the town were to be sued and had to settle a lawsuit, the stabilization funding is exposed to that. The capital stabilization fund is protected. So that can only be used for capital. So the balances, as you can see, we're getting pretty close to equal on that. The last line is the certified free cash for this year is 1.5 million. I'll go to the next slide. So here at the top is the certified free cash. And this is what the recommended use is. And we sort of just talked about some of these in the article. So there was that UDAG article for the Worthingdale lawsuit. So that's 230,000. That'll be the last payment on that lawsuit settlement. And so moving forward, then that will be resolved. On the OPEB, the 178,000 is the free cash I had just mentioned. To get to the 300,000, the balance is from the meals tax. The forward funding of the pension, as Lou pointed out, and I appreciate, this is the second payment. So the 300,000, and then we're done with that after this town meeting, and we'll realize about 1.5 million in savings. The compensated absences fund, which was just created. And in this fund, these funds can only be used for these purposes. 50,000, this would be the first payment. And Ms. Gabri at this time has calculated if we could do one more for 50,000 next year, then we should be in good shape. So then we come back to these two, the capital stabilization and the stabilization. And then the next slide will show how we came up with these amounts. So the omnibus budget for FY22 is 16.1 million. That's draft 3 that you have. The only thing that's going to change on that, as I mentioned earlier, is an amount on the police and dispatch contract. And in the large scheme, it's going to be a nominal impact to that. And we're going to know that very shortly. Per the financial policies, the stabilization should strive to be at a minimum of 7% of the operating revenue, which for FY22, 7% would be about 1.1 million. But as you saw in the previous slide, we far exceed that at 2.6 million, and we keep putting money in there to keep building it up, granted a smaller amount. With the town, we've maintained our stabilization balance. And as the select board discussed last night, both in capital and stabilization, maybe we need to begin to look towards spending some of that, especially in capital. In the last several years, the town's been increasing capital stabilization in preparation for any significant capital emergency, but also future capital needs. And two of the ones that we can think of on the horizon are the new senior center project and a need for a new elementary school. So capital stabilization funds could be used towards that. And that's why the lion's share continues to go in capital stabilization. So when the buy board met, we looked at 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, which is consistent with previous years, looks to put that lion's share of the 795,000 in capital with a small amount in stabilization. And we looked at a second scenario that sort of put about 690 in capital and 105,000 in stabilization, balancing it some. And then we talked about sort of scenario 3, any combination between the two funds of the 795. And at the buy board on the 25th, sort of the consensus was to move this year anyway with scenario 1 again, which is putting the lion's share in capital, because we know that there's the elementary school, potentially the field project, depending on how that goes, the senior center, plus forever there could be a major infrastructure emergency. So that's where we came up with the stabilization article. I don't know if there's any questions on that. And again, we'll touch upon that on Tuesday as well.
Robert,
Yes.
this is Lou. I have a question really just for my own understanding. Once money goes into the capital stabilization fund or the stabilization fund, can that money be moved to the other fund, or is it basically locked in that for that purpose?
It's locked in that fund, but can be moved subject to an act of town meeting. So in other words, if we needed to transfer funding from, say, stabilization to capital or vice versa, it would take an act of town meeting.
Okay, thanks.
So that would be a warrant article.
Correct. We'd have to, and to access both of them, would take an act of town meeting. So it's important to note that the select board, the FinCom, department heads, this is the big time, as they say. It would take an act of town meeting. In my time, we've never had to access either, knock on wood, funds. So that's the stabilization article, and you have those slides, and then we'll just go back to, we're almost done. We'll go back to the warrant shared slides. And then Article 23 and 24, we have a community preservation committee. And by statute, each year, Article 23 is the Community Preservation Act article. The CPC, the committee, the Community Preservation Committee, town meeting has to appropriate the funding under the Community Preservation Act. So that's this article. We're just waiting for the numbers from the CPC, which are due no later than Friday. And this article is on every annual town meeting warrant. And then the
I'm glad to see you've got a short line there, so it's going to be a small number.
And then the second is a community preservation fund where they look to transfer some of their funding each year to different purposes. And this one, forgive me, is to do sort of administrative and due diligence functions, like if they're doing title search on land and or so forth. It's for their administration costs. 27. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. So then we get just quickly, because a lot of these are not financial in nature. We're almost done. These are sort of the general business and bylaw articles. Article 25 is the tax incremental finance agreement, the TIF, for Catania Spagna Corporation. And as I mentioned, on April 14th at 6, there's going to be a presentation on this. There's going to be a presentation at town meeting. A TIF is a tax incremental finance agreement that is subject to approval by town meeting. And the Catania Spagna, this is the olive oil company located on Nemco Way and Westford Road, is looking to expand their plant specifically for bottling functions. And they've approached the town looking for a 10-year TIF, so a period of 10 years in which the tax incremental financing is give them about a 50% tax relief on just the new expansion part of the building. In exchange, they are going to create 35 new jobs in the next few years, as well as some other benefits, which they'll talk about at town meeting. There's going to be information at town meeting on this. There's going to be a presentation on this. I'd be happy, in the interest of time, also to talk to folks individually on this. So Article 25 does have a potential finance impact in terms of, if you will, giving tax relief for the expansion to the tune of about 50%, which would be about about an $800,000 savings to the company over the next 10 years. These often are greatly debated at town meeting, and there's mixed opinions on them. Our role at the town is to get all of the information out there and get the accurate information, and ultimately town meeting will make the decision. They can either approve the TIF or not. And in the town, there's a history sort of both ways. We've had a lot of successful TIFs and some that haven't passed. So that's Article 25. 26 is the transfer of the Woodlawn Cemetery to the town of Ayer. This is a two-part process. So the Woodlawn Cemetery is the cemetery over near just past Wendy's. If you're heading towards Harvard, where the All Town, it's on both sides of the road. It's a historic cemetery that's been run by the Woodlawn Cemetery Company for decades. It's not a town cemetery, which is unique in that sense. Ayer doesn't have a municipal cemetery. The trustees of the Woodlawn Cemetery are getting ready to retire. It's also been a challenge for them, being a small entity, to continue to operate the cemetery. They would like to transfer the cemetery to the town of Ayer to own and operate moving forward. So first of all, if that happens, it will always be a cemetery, because people have asked that the town cannot redevelop it and so forth. It is a historic cemetery. It also has a veterans burial ground, and it's an active cemetery. So the town would continue to sell graves, moving forward. They want to transfer, it's a 10.5 acre cemetery. They want to transfer the land, all of the personal property and equipment, and they want to transfer the funding. They have about $200,000 in funding, perpetual care and so forth, that would come to the town. It's a two-part process. We're asking town meeting on the 26th to authorize the town to move forward with the transfer. If we get that green light to move forward, then we would come back in the fall, after we've done all of the due diligence, to put together the cemetery commission and the rest of the details. And there will be a presentation on this at town meeting.
Are you gonna move your office over there, Robert?
I am not. I am not. So that's 26. And then 27 is an affordable housing trust bylaw. At the last town meeting, this was a two-part process of voted to create an affordable housing trust. Now, the second part, these are the bylaws governing it. This trust would be, if created, would consist of 7 trustees, and you can read in the article, it spells all of this out. And the Affordable Housing Trust would be able to provide various housing assistance and so forth. Their funding would come from the CPC housing category, as well as other state grants and so forth. So in the interest of time, again, I encourage you to take a look at it. It is a good project, not really a direct financial impact, meaning this article here. It's a long one because you have to put the whole bylaw in the warrant. 28 has to do with the DPW is looking to loop the water system over near the hospital to improve water flow, not only to the hospital, but in that area of town. And to do that, it's going to go under the rail trail, which is state property. So Article 97 land that's owned by the state. This article would be town meeting would vote to authorize the town to secure the easement and also the land involved with that. 29 and 30, they've since, here you just have the notes, but we do have both of the articles. Our stormwater bylaw in 29 and in 30 needs to be updated by July 1st to meet our MS4 permit, which is the permit with the federal government regarding the wastewater plant. And so this makes changes to both bylaws to be in compliance. There'll be a presentation at town meeting. And on this version, we just got the final language. So here you just have the notes on that. And then I think, is that it? And then there's a street acceptance for Trevor Trail. This is one of the roads in the new development up off near Nashua Street. Town meeting has to authorize the acceptance of public ways. If this passes, then Trevor Trail becomes a public way and the town assumes the maintenance for the road. So that's Article 31. There are no citizens petitions. The deadline is Friday that we know of. So the citizens petition. And lastly, there was a petition article that we just got that's going to be on here. The regional school agreement has a mechanism in which you can amend the regional school agreement. And Mr. Jim Quinty, who's a Shirley resident and also on the school committee, was able to get 10,000 signatures not 10,000, excuse me. If you get 10% of the registered voters in either town, so in this case, Shirley, the selectmen have to put a warrant article on the warrant to amend the agreement. And they're he wants to amend the way in which the school committee incurs debt. The school committee is not in support of this, hence why he's gone for this petition. And he did get the signatures. So when we meet on Tuesday, we want to definitely talk about that issue as well. What he wants to do right now, when they borrow, like for the field project, it activates an election in both towns. He wants to change the process in which instead of an election, the school committee could borrow debt. But if one of the member towns disagrees with that, they have 60 days, they could call a town meeting. And if you will, the town meeting could prevent the borrowing. There's a lot of politics behind it, which we'll talk about on Tuesday and so forth. It's a Shirley petition, which is also interesting because our town meeting goes first. So Shirley goes, so if it doesn't pass an air, it's sort of dead. So we'll have more discussion on that on Tuesday, and I'll be sending you the materials we just received on that for you to review. So that's the town meeting warrant in a nutshell. I know it's a lot of material, but I
It's a
wanted
big
to,
nutshell, Robert.
yeah, it's a big nutshell. So I don't know if there are any questions.
30.
It's Lou, I have a question.
Yeah,
This relates to the police station new
Yeah.
HVAC system.
yes,
You know, part of the expense is referred to in Article 11 and part of it is referred to in Article 13.
yes.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but it would be helpful to someone like me to have some cross-reference in those two articles referencing the fact that this isn't the total cost, but the other part of the cost will be covered by the other article. I mean, I
Yep.
don't know if that's appropriate and if that's ever done, but it just would seem to make sense for my.
That, Lou, I agree with you. That does make perfect sense because if you look at either one, it's not enough to cover the total cost. Yeah, that's good.
So Lou, and that's why we do this, and it's important in the explanatory notes. Absolutely, that's a good point. I'm making a note here. So where you see in Article 11, police station HVAC 52565, and then as you mentioned, we can put in the explanatory note and put the indication to better explain that.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, because.
So is it gonna be, Robert, I was just wondering, that almost sounds like if you vote yes on one, you vote yes on the other, or if you vote no on one, you vote no on the other. How would that work if it was split?
If it was split, we would only, whatever passed, we would have the authorization for the funding, and then we would be short. And we'd have to go to plan B.
So maybe it would be a good idea to hook those two together so they're mutually exclusive or inclusive.
Let me check on that. That's a good point. Let me check on that. So we've got
Yeah,
two
just
things on that. We've got the explanatory note, as Lou mentioned. I think that's a good point. And let me see your question, Pat. What happened if we can couple it? Mhm.
It's unlikely, but this is Ayer.
And just so, as a reminder, we always remind folks, when we get to the omnibus, which is Article 4, the night of town meeting, and we'll do this actually on Tuesday, Lisa and I'll give a general overview of the highlights. And then what we generally do is we go through each of the lines of the omnibus, even on Tuesday, and we ask for members, be a little different on Zoom, but it'll work, to say pass if you have a question or comment on each of the lines, and then we come back to it. And that's what we do at town meeting as well. So when the moderator reads the omnibus line items, he or she will announce in the beginning, ask people to just say pass. Pass means somebody either has a question or comment or wants to talk about that line item, and then we go back to the passes. So we always remind folks on that because it's a little different. So we read all of the lines. Sometimes there's only a couple passes. Sometimes there's a pass on every line, and I'm ready to lay down. I'm just kidding, but Tuesday.
Depends on who's at the meeting, Robert.
Yeah, so Tuesday we'll do that too. So,
Yeah.
so if FinCom members and select board members have questions, we read through, or just say pass, we make a note, and then we come back to it. And it's what we do at town meeting as well. And the system seems to work pretty good.
Robert, back on the cemetery.
Yeah.
So if we assume, if the town of Ayer assumes the responsibility for the cemetery,
Mhm.
what's the pluses and minuses of that, as far as from a cost perspective?
Sure.
Is a town budgeting, or I'm sorry, we would probably have to budget, right, and have some requirements to spend money there.
So it's an excellent point, and we're going to have a presentation on this at town meeting. So what are the pluses and the minuses to it? And let's talk from a financial point of view. So what we do know, so assuming, town meeting on April 26th is just going to give the green light to start the due diligence. That's an important thing to note. If in the due diligence, there's something that isn't in the town's best interest or what have you, obviously we don't move forward. What we do know is that they spend about $25,000 a year maintaining the cemetery. That's mowing the grass, basic maintenance, and so forth. We also know that they charge $800 a burial. And that's their purview. And what we've looked at is, frankly, that is very reasonable. If you look at comparable municipal cemeteries are charging between $1,500 and $2,000 for a burial. So if we assumed at a very minimum, we're looking at about $25,000 in just the basic maintenance. As I mentioned earlier, there's about $200,000 in funding that they would give to us. The thinking is, and there's more to be done on this, that the operational piece of the cemetery would be done by the DPW. Now,
Yeah, Mark could do that when he retires.
Yes, there you go. He has said that. So there's some options. Do we subcontract out those functions? So Woodlawn, they don't do the work, they have subcontractors. So do we subcontract out? Do we do the work in-house, which we can do, or do we do a combination? So
Parks, Rec, and Burials.
right. The thinking is that this would hit the budget for the FY23 budget. So in other words, if town meeting gives the green light in April, and I'll send you the slides, I did a presentation on this last night, in April, we'll do the due diligence lasting through October. Due diligence. Before all of any money is transferred, we have to do an audit of all of the funds. We've started some of this work, an inventory of all the personal property, figuring out the grade. There's a lot of internal due diligence. We come back to town meeting in October, the fall town meeting. At that, we will have done the due diligence, report back to town meeting, and at town meeting, we would be asking town meeting to adopt the statute that creates a cemetery commission. See, we don't have a cemetery commission. This would be an appointed commission that oversees the policies and the rates of the cemetery, and the DPW, would do the work. So it's a two-part process. We see the costs. There will be costs, but the cost of not doing it, and they've told us this, they've done a fine job, is that if we don't take over the cemetery, they're eventually, to use their phrase, going to financially go down, and they're not going to be able to do it. And we have an obligation legally, morally, and under state law, you're required to have a public burial place. We have to do the right thing and assume it. And
Absolutely.
of course, and we'd be in a better position to secure other funding such as grants and so forth. So Terry, you hit the nail on the head for the presentation at town meeting. That's what we want to show to the town meeting is, yes, there are some costs, but we can absorb those costs. We're getting some funding from them, and it's in the best interest of the cemetery moving forward. And we would be able to generate revenue for the cemetery in the sense with burials and so forth. And that's another consideration for town meeting in the fall, is not only the creation of the commission, but the creation, you could have a cemetery enterprise fund, for example.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's absolutely a moral obligation for the town to take that over, because what's the alternative?
Right. In aesthetic, I mean, it's an active burial ground. There's the veterans portion. There's the historic portion. It's right at the gateway to the town. I mean, if it was left into disrepair. So there's a lot of work to be done, assuming town meeting gives the green light to do that due diligence between now and October. And then we'd be coming back. So when we come back in October, the town meeting and the people will have the whole picture and then can make the appropriate decision.
Robert, just thinking about it from a little bit of an abstract, every year the town's real estate is valued, and that's used in part for the setting of our real estate tax. This is 10 acres, which frankly, given the size of our town, that's a pretty good sized chunk, all in one fell swoop. What's that going to do to the appraisal values of the overall town real estate and, or does it? I don't know. I'm just curious. It just seems like, I mean, if a cemetery, I have no idea what the land will be valued at. No idea. Is there some way to find that out?
That's a good question. I'm sure it's going to be part of the dude. I'll check with the assessors. That's a good question. I don't know the specific answer. I think it's important to note, because this question came up at a meeting last night, that 10 acres under state law is a cemetery. So what I'm getting at is if the town takes it, we can't, the undeveloped part, decide we're going to repurpose it or what have you. That's in the state law, because folks have asked that question.
Well, that's a good thing.
We're taking a cemetery. It's a good chunk of land and it still has capacity for burial purposes. But once we take it, it's not like, I would just make this clear, it's not like the town can decide, okay, on the undeveloped 3 acres, we're going to develop it or what have you.
We're going to put it in an amusement park.
Right,
Or how about a Halloween fest?
right. Yeah.
Okay,
It
well,
is a
that's-
cemetery. It'll always be a cemetery. The question is, do we be proactive and take ownership of it from folks who've done a great job for decades? Or do we get into a reactive mode, which is never good to be in?
No.
So,
One last quick question. How did they get their funding for it?
so it goes all the way back to 1838. I mean, it's a historic cemetery. It was part of Groton at the time. And their funding has come from, and this will be part of the due diligence, it had become from the sale of graves. And that was part of the problem because that was their main source. And as you can see, at $800, it didn't keep up. In some years, there's not a lot of burials either because burial practices have changed. They do get a small amount of funding from the Veterans Administration because there's a veterans component to the cemetery. And through the decades, they have a few CDs and, investments, and that's what constitutes sort of that 200,000 I mentioned. So the town could obviously, through the burial piece, I think those rates need to be looked at to be, I mean, that the average, and that's on the low side, is 1,500. There's also a lot of municipal grants for cemeteries that are out there, and we just have more capacity. That's not a reflection on the Woodlawn group. They've done a great job, but we have more capacity to address a lot of these issues.
I'd like to put in a reservation.
Pardon?
I'd like to put in a reservation.
Okay.
At $800, yeah.
I'll give you Mark Wetzel's phone number. We keep kidding him that he's going to be the grave digger.
Right.
So,
Robert, that's great.
yeah, I appreciate the time. I know it's a lot of information. You're going to get a final clean copy of both on Friday. Look it over. The other thing is there's always a lot of questions, and there should be a lot of questions. And frankly, there should be questions at town meeting as well. You know what I'm saying? I mean, town meeting is the place to have these larger discussions on some of these issues facing the town.
And I would postulate that the upcoming town meeting will be a session for sure.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Are you concluded?
I covered everything. I appreciate your time. I know it was a lot of
Awesome.
material. So if you have questions, as I always do when the meeting gets over, zap me an email or give me a phone call. And I'm going to see you all again on Tuesday. We will get into this in some more detail. And then we try to do a lot of public outreach leading up to town meeting.
Right. Are there any questions or comments from either members of the committee or James in the audience?
Not at this time. I think Robert did a great job of the summary. I heard last night's as well, except for some of the Woodlawn Cemetery. And he,
Yeah, Robert does a very good job, and we're lucky to have him come and present to us so willingly, especially when we abuse him like we do. Well, if there's no other business to discuss, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
All right, this is Terry Harville. I say I move to close the Ayer FinCom meeting for 31 March 2021 at, looks like 6:11.
Looks like it.
Look
This
forward
Selby,
to-
I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Terry
Aye.
Harville, aye.
Selby says aye.
On roll.